you mentioned Cliff Farm, you mentioned Town Madison,
Right.
the Breland companies, and if that's the scope of kind of what you're doing, cool, then maybe kind of dive into some of the newer developments of that.
Okay.
Because I'm sure that, to be current and cut, I'm sure it's changing all the time.
It is, yeah.
What's in, what's out. But yeah, I mean, kind of, if you could just give us a good primer of your role in Breland companies and some of the cool things that are going on right now.
Well, Breland Companies, if you look at it, is essentially, I guess it comes down to land development, buying raw land and developing it, turning it into something else. And we do that for a variety of different uses. One is develop it into lots and communities that you then go either build the houses and the homes on the lots, which we used to do as Breland homes. So we would develop the subdivision, you put in all the utilities, you put in the amenities,
Right.
and then somebody comes and builds the homes. So you can either sell the lots to other builders or you can build on them yourself. So obviously after we sold Breland Homes, now we do that, but then just provide the lots or sell them to other builders.
Right.
So there's that kind of a land development. Then you've got land development that we also do that is self-storage. Safe Mini that you see around the community. We've got 11 locations in Alabama and southern Mississippi. That's a Breland company. That's something that Lewis has always been in that business as well, of the self-storage business. So we're kind of building it for that specific purpose. And then we own and operate those.
Safe Mini is the brand
Mini
name?
storage. Yeah, self-storage. Okay. And then the third is kind of, again, developing it for different kind of commercial uses, or what we now all call, a mixed-use community.
Yeah.
So that's really where Clift Farm and Town Madison come in. Is they are probably two of the most high-profile mixed-use developments, really in the Southeast. Both of them very different, but both of them over 500 acres plus of a kind of a master planned community. That's kind of everybody throws out the term live, work, play, but you try to get as many of those elements as you can in there to kind of create kind of your own community. When you've got 500 acres, you've got an opportunity to do that, and to bring some different things in there, and to have different kind of users. And then it's always very interesting how you try to get those to marry up with each other and to kind of complement and such, when you're going from commercial to office to, medical to retail and then residential. And then residential, you've got, of course, apartments, you've got townhouses, you've got, patio homes, you've got more single family detached, larger homes. So making all those things kind of work together. So it really is a kind of a puzzle. So that's kind of in a nutshell what Breland Companies does.
Yeah.
And in my role is kind of assisting across all of those in kind of a, jack of all trades. Again, my background really comes out of kind of strategic communications, government relations. So, I'm kind of the government interface, which you have a lot of. I mean, you've got planning commissions, you've got councils to deal with, you've got multiple utilities that you have to deal with. Most of those have boards. So there's a lot of interaction with kind of local governments that has to be done. And then in the case of the Town Madison project, there was getting the approval for the new interstate interchange and kind of getting that under construction, which was a whole different ball of government interaction you had to do, and something I'll never do again, because it was probably the most frustrating experience I've ever had.
And it's somewhat phased, it seems, right?
It is phased.
Just looking at those on and off ramps.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 phases, right?
Yeah, two different phases. So the final phase is, of course, under construction now, but extremely difficult dealing with the Federal Highway Administration. If you think your local planning commission is difficult, go deal with those guys, okay? Because they don't do anything quickly. So,
right.
But that's essentially kind of what I do, and of course a lot of the community relations. I spend a lot of time at HOAs, meeting with our neighbors, helping get our own HOAs established. And so really just kind of across several different, of parts of the development that I work in.
Yeah. So let's start with, with Cliff Farm. Let's put that one aside for a minute. And I want to talk about Town Madison.
Right.
Because certainly I know that the anchor, the flagship is Toyota Field.
Right.
And a lot of cool things are starting to develop now. And to your knowledge, who's that first person that should get credit, the visionary for Town Madison, whether it was the stadium, whether it was just mixed use? Who had that first idea?
Well, yeah, it really does come back to Louis Breland.
Okay.
Louis developed a lot of what you see south of 565 in that Zert Road corridor.
Okay.
One of his first developments that he started building homes in when he moved here in the 80s was in Edgewater.
Okay.
His office used to be, he's had two different offices kind of right in that same area, either on Zert Road or on kind of Madison Boulevard, kind of right across from where the stadium is. So, and his home actually today is down Zert Road. So this was always a large piece of land that was kept intact and had no development on it. It was owned by a man named Jim Medlock.
Okay.
Jim Medlock was one of the founders of the Intergraph Corporation, which is now Hexagon out there. Mm-hmm. And when they developed that Hexagon campus, he bought all of the rest of that land kind of from Zert Road all the way over to Wall Triana, and he kind of kept that, and that was his land, and he just never really got around to developing it. So over the years, of course, Louis would see this large piece of land and would talk to Jim about buying it at some point. And finally, Jim, got to the point where he decided he was kind of moving to the beach. He, I believe, has a large kind of a convention center hotel at the beach. I think he's also got a winery in Napa. So he had some, some other interests that kind of took him away. And so Louis bought that land and always looked at it and said, this is such a great location that it can be something different. That, obviously he develops hundreds of communities and, neighborhoods and, single family residential. And he could have done that, across this 500 acres and made a lot of money, to be quite honest. Probably saved himself a lot of time and headache of trying to get an interchange and all the things that are there now. But he always, saw this as something that there could be something special. And then the evolution from that really mirrors what you've seen in the changes in our society and how we live and the internet and commercial over the last 20 years. Because the first site plan for let's do this mixed use, well, there was just you put all the residential back here in the back, and up here we're going to put this huge power center, and we're going to have a Macy's on one end and a Bass Pro on the other, and a bunch of stores and some restaurants between the two of them, half of which have gone bankrupt, since that time. And that was the way development was done.
Right.
The internet changed commercial completely. A lot of those names that, again, are, they're not doing any more Macy's. Macy's is trying to figure out how they exist in this kind of a thing. So that changed completely. And then you did start to see what you call mixed use. So Louis has always been one of these guys that wants to go see what's the cutting edge. And so he spent a lot of time going to visit different kind of mixed use communities. One of the ones that was really pulls us together earliest over in Georgia was Avalon, north of Atlanta.
Okay.
And again, it had a large kind of corporate presence, very nice, well planned out commercial and restaurant, and then residential. But they're all kind of mixed in together. It's not you're over here and you're over here. And the whole idea is it was a way to kind of replace the traditional commercial model. The commercial model before was you needed, a bunch of people come to your anchor stores. And when they were at the anchors, they would also visit some of the other stores. Your residential and your office kind of became your anchors. So that's what put the people on the project. So they would explain it. They're like, look, during the day, it's a bunch of people from the office that come out and they eat lunch and they buy things, or they'll go to the store on the way home. And then in the evenings, all the residential folks come in, and then they're there kind of for dinner. Yeah. And the guys that are driving past that come, exit and come in are kind of what is the profit. But their anchor is kind of the activity it generates from within the project. So we pretty quickly decided to do something like that here, and then brought in Andres Dewani, who is a land planner, what they call New Urbanist movement. And kind of, again, talking about London and some other places that have been around for a few hundred years. It's how do you develop something that can change and adapt over time and a little bit be timeless. And that's really kind of the design that was developed for Town Madison. But it also always had that, what's going to be that anchor? What's the anchor? Office is kind of a difficult animal in Huntsville just because of the way Research Park is, and that's really where companies want to be. Right. So it's hard to kind of say, okay, let's go build a big office building and have that as an anchor. So So baseball, when they kind of came to town for the first time and were interested in doing a stadium, and I think I met with them probably on their first trip to Huntsville because they were looking for a location.
This was the Angels?
Well, it was the ownership group that, at that time was in the middle of purchasing the Mobile Bay Bears, the minor league team in Mobile, and they were going to move them.
Gotcha.
And they were going to looking at Madison, they were looking at Baton Rouge, and they were looking at maybe I think it was Savannah or maybe North Augusta, so somewhere over in Georgia. And those were kind of the areas that they were interested in. But they got to Madison, and in talking to them, their vision for how they wanted to run the stadium and run the team was very different than what we'd heard in the past for a sports venue. And it was, how do you make the stadium facility kind of a part of the community?
Yeah.
How do you do other, what they call non-baseball events?
Sure.
So you look at it, minor league baseball is only going to be 70 days out of the year. Yeah. So if you're a retailer or a restaurant, you say, well, okay, what about the other 270 days? What do you got for me? So but they do so much other things there with movie nights, with of course the 4th of July, the Christmas lights.
They still had Ricky Fernandez on my very first episode, and he talked about at one point during COVID they had to sell chicken.
Yeah,
he's like, we were selling chicken out of the parking lot,
and
they did 167 non-baseball events just to.
But the non-baseball events were always part of their business plan, not selling chicken.
Right.
But and they didn't want to be the only part of their business plan, which they were forced to do.
Right.
But again, it was always to build a club room that you could do proms and weddings and other things. And again, they do a Kentucky Derby party. They've got a wine and beer festival. They had 600 scouts spending the night on the field the other night. So just those things that appealed to us because it wasn't something that was kind of just off by itself, that was kind of inaccessible, and it brought people to the project a lot, more so than just during baseball. So that really kind of helped energize the retailers, the restaurants. They want to be around that, which then kind of just is what's starting to make that a successful, very unique project. So
it's we moved here Christmas Eve of 2021, and I had been here a few times. One time in September, once in November, and then once in early December. But I hadn't driven by Toyota Field at night,
right? And
they hadn't started like their Christmas light thing. And so when we move in, I think I came in at like 2 a.m, and I don't know if that's the case. But sometime that week, we drive by. I knew it was Toyota Field,
sure.
But I drive by at night. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then, so they have the Christmas light thing, and then they have the fair, the big old fair, stuff like that. Yeah. Like, all right, this is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, and again, draws thousands of people, and that's really what you want. So it was they really always had that different business model. And it's also different than, what we had with the Huntsville Stars at Joe Davis Stadium. That again, it was just kind of almost closed off to people, that was kind of inaccessible. Most stadiums now today.
Yeah.
They want the public to come in and do things. They want you to, they want to do yoga in the outfield. I mean, they want to, get your fitness classes to come in and use, parts of it. So, so that's really, part of the little bit of a change in attitude of, again, if the public is going to invest in these venues, we want to get as much use out of it as we can.